Many thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa. I am Daniel Daze. Now, more than 30 African heads of state are in Nairobi for the Africa Forward Summit, co-hosted by Kenyan President William Ruto and his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron. The two-day meeting is being billed as a reset in relations between France and Africa, with talks focused on investment, artificial intelligence, climate finance and trade. The summit comes as France seeks to rebuild influence on the continent following military withdrawals and diplomatic setbacks in parts of West Africa. More than $1 billion in deals have already been announced, including an $823 million French investment in the Kenyan port of Mombasa. It is the first time the summit is being held in an Anglophone African country, a symbolic shift as France looks to expand partnerships beyond its traditional Francophone allies. Let's cross over to Focus on Africa's lead presenter, Wahiga Mwaura, who has been at the summit. Wahiga, what are the latest developments from the first day?
Well, Daniel, quite a lot has been happening here today. I'm not sure if the band behind me is belting the tunes of a new France-Africa sort of way of engagement. It's still early to tell. But what I can tell you is this: the delegates that are here have spent the better part of the day in different rooms, different meetings, whether sort of audience or bilateral, charting out what this new France-Africa engagement will look like. And some of the people that we've been talking to have been quite bullish about this. We earlier spoke to Kenya's foreign minister, who told us that one of the demands by African leaders at this summit would be for a relook at how African countries are rated when it comes to the credit they can access when they go out to international markets. He says that the situation in the Middle East, risky as it has been, shows that it is possible to risk countries favorably, even if they're in a region where there have been various security challenges. We've also spoken to business leaders here, including Nigerian oil and gas magnate Tony Elumelu, who said he's looking for fresh investment for Africa here. He talks about Africa having an infrastructure gap. Part of the reason why African goods and services aren't getting to the markets they need to is because of a waning infrastructure or a lack of infrastructure on the continent. And he's hoping that by the time the summit is done, that is something that will have changed. But there's a lot to focus on this summit as well, including what the hosts have had to say. We earlier were listening to Kenyan President William Ruto, who spoke to how excited he is about what a new France-Africa partnership will look like. This is how he put it in his own words.
We can speak for ourselves as Africans. And I want to say, and to congratulate President Macron for having the courage to recalibrate the relationship between Africa and France, to make it more inclusive. It's not about Anglophone, Francophone. I think to broaden the conversation, make it much more inclusive.
It's also been a very busy day for French President Emmanuel Macron, who since landing in Kenya has met President William Ruto, met Kenyan creatives, ran on the streets of Nairobi with Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon great, but also addressed delegates here at this summit, where he spoke to how different he expects France-Africa relations to be moving forward. This is how he addressed some of the questions that delegates had here today.
The
president put it very well yesterday when he said, we don't want that anymore. We don't need your help. And that's just as well, because let's be honest, we don't really have the resources for it either. Plus, it creates a lot of tension. We are always having arguments at home. People say we should help them, but then we already have so many problems and so on. No, Africa is succeeding.
L'Afrique, elle est en train de réussir.
So the message from both leaders: Africa has the potential to succeed internally, but it doesn't hurt to have partners, and that's what France say they will be doing. And that was the message echoed by Kenya's foreign minister, who's also the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi. The Focus on Africa got the chance to exclusively speak to him in a wide-ranging interview to discuss why Kenya for this summit. Previously, I mean, it would be unheard of to have a France-Africa summit in a non-French-speaking African country, and also what the future looks like for France-Africa relations. This is what he told me when I posed some of those questions to him in this exclusive interview.
Kenya has been a pivotal country on matters diplomacy and also conventions. And therefore, when we made the decision after consultations with France. We thought that this would be a good opportunity.
Let's talk about your co-host, France, in this particular case. Now, their track record on the African continent when it comes to dealing with many other African countries has been nothing short of controversial. Was that a consideration when you decided to host this conference?
I think the talking points of the summit are very clear. We are going to talk about peace and security, and then we are focusing largely on the economic partnership. And it is telling that it is called the Africa Forward Summit. It's not about wanting to dig and look into the past.
I would ask you this. Is France trying to rebrand its image in Africa through Kenya?
I think that would be best answered by France itself. But for us, we treat our partners individually.
One of the partners, France, has signed a new deal with Kenya. I believe it's a new defense pact. And we recently saw some soldiers actually coming for joint training. Now, several West African nations have actually expelled French soldiers from their shores. I'm talking about Ivory Coast, I'm talking about Senegal, I'm talking about Niger. And then Kenya is welcoming them now with open arms. Do you see the challenge of uniting Africa when one party is doing one thing and the other is doing it differently?
I'd like to encourage you to understand the difference between a defense cooperation agreement and troops on the ground. Please, there's a distinction.
Clarify for us.
Defense cooperation agreement can come in many ways. Capacity building, sharing of intelligence, ensuring that you can secure equipment and different capacities on the basis of maybe concessionary arrangements. We have defense cooperation agreements with many countries.
What is Kenya pushing France for? You've opened your doors. France, come and co-host this summit with us. What are you asking them about reforms you'd like to see at the global stage when it comes to the financial architecture that many African leaders say has impoverished the continent?
We want to be able to have the financial institutions and the rest of the world to assess Africa's risk differently. Let's give an example. They have always said that Africa is a continent that is full of conflict or that is a high-risk area. Today, we have just seen in the Middle East a whole complete reawakening, that the risk level in that area perhaps was even higher than Africa. But they have been accessing financing and credit at more concessionary rates globally. So this is an opportunity for us to say that you have been assessing Africa wrongly. The credit rating mechanisms that have been applied to Africa need to be relooked at.
So some interesting questions on trade are being asked at this conference. Africa is about 17% of the world's population, doesn't trade as much with itself as it should, and yet represents very little of global trade overall. There are a lot of contradictions and gaps there. To help us understand this, and also what this summit means for him and the organization he leads, is Felix Chege, who's the founder and CEO of Real Sources Africa. Welcome to Focus on Africa, and thank you for your time. You listened to some of the deliberations happening here today on day one of this summit, the business part of it. What stood out for you?
I think what stood out for me is that, one, Africa is open for business, and Africa is open for investments. But most importantly, opportunities are actually available. And what stood out for me is that France is willing to come to Africa and now look at Africa from a partnership conversation. Either there's what Africa has to offer and there's what France has to offer, and working together and having a mutual kind of a collaborative approach to the partnership, now looking forward, but not looking from the past that has been there.
I mean, your organization supports Kenyan entrepreneurs tap into the Africa free trade area, get their goods far out there to 8 markets. I think that's what you mentioned to me. If it's working as well as you've put it, do we need external partners? Can't Africa simply trade internal? Do we need France?
Yes, actually, I think Africa needs any kind of partner or every kind of partner to come on board. Look at it from a point of Yes, some of these markets are way ahead. And there's aspects of one technology transfer, there's aspect of what we need to work together. And aspects to do with, looking from an aspect of Africa may not be able to grow only by itself, but partnerships are always the best way to be able to work together as long as they're mutually relating to each other.
I mean, French President Emmanuel Macron today was quoted as saying that the new way of operating with Africa will be a Pan-African one. There are those who've questioned that. If you got a minute with him and he told you what is needed to help African countries trade better, what would that look like?
Industrialization. We keep on talking about we have raw materials, we have a lot of products we can actually produce within the market. But I think the biggest thing we need to look at is investing in industrialization. We want to create jobs for our people. But basically, the investment into manufacturing is the only way that we are going to grow the continent by itself. And one of the players is actually France to come and invest in Africa. One of his statements was that also they don't have enough resources, or they may not have the money to invest here. But we always say that is what Africa has to offer, the raw materials. The little investment that they have from their end, let's work together, let's collaborate, let's add value. We always talk about value addition. Once we build value together, then we are all able to earn through the value that has been created. And I think that's what we all need to focus on.
There's been a narrative from some African leaders that it's time for African solutions to African problems. You've looked at the whole chain of the Africa Free Trade Area in terms of getting goods and services from one country to the other, etc. What's the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is demand. I might decide to disagree with the aspects of logistics being the main challenge, financing being the main gap that is there. But I think we need to ask ourselves, why are they challenges? Because I believe the reason why logistics is a challenge is because we do not have enough demand. There's a difference between a 1.3 billion population and a 1.3 billion market. We need to build demand. We need to create demand for our Kenyan tea in West Africa. We need to create demand for West African shea butter within the Kenyan market. Once you build demand, then it's a no-brainer. We need to invest in logistics because there is demand for that logistics to move cargo. We'll require to invest in financing because there is demand for that particular perspective. And I think once we start from demand, the rest will sort itself eventually.
I feel like I'm getting an economics lesson on the sidelines of a summit like this. Felix Chege, founder and CEO of Real Sources Africa. Fascinating conversation that we will continue to have. But for now, we need to go back to studio. Thank you for your time. And those are some of the insights and some of the conversations happening here. Will they lead to real change? Is there going to be a reset of relations? Well, we'll have to see what happens on day 2 of this summit. 35 heads of state. So many leaders will be gathered at a location not far from here, still within Nairobi's Central Business District for day 2 of the summit. And we expect to hear more statements as various African leaders take to the stage to address a myriad of issues that we'll be covering here for you on Focus on Africa. Thanks for joining us. That's all for now from here. But we've got a lot more news for you from Daniel in studio. Daniel.
That's right. Interesting insights there from Focus on Africa's Wahiga Mara on the latest developments from the summit. But still to come on Focus on Africa, we take a look at some of Africa's biggest film